Go.
There we are. Good morning and welcome to another Go-to-Market Friday, and we're welcoming back Jen Shapiro. You may remember Jen as a sales leader, enterprise sales leader. She's got some great experiences that she's going to share from her point of view from a sales and marketing perspective on sales and marketing alignment today. Can't wait to dig into this topic. We've been talking about it for a long time, but just some background. My co-host Meg and I, Meg, former CMO, former head of Serious Decisions Research. We have been doing this for 3+ years, 400+ episodes on go-to-market best practices. We would encourage you, if you get value from this conversation, to like and subscribe to our B2B Fusion web channel. And there you can find all those best practices. Of course, if you have a specific question, feel free to either ask us directly here. This conversation is as much as yours as it is ours. So if you've got a question for Jen or for us today, pop it into LinkedIn chat, and we can certainly address it there. Or if you've got a specific go-to-market question, Meg and I can route you to the right direction if we can't answer it directly ourselves. So with that, Meg, do you want to give a warm welcome back to Jen, since this is her second victory lap through here?
Yes, we're very excited to have you. But before I do that, John, I just want to say this Veterans Day week, that we thank you very much for your service and also for your continued support of our veterans in a variety of ways. So
thank you. It was an honor. It was an honor.
Wow, we appreciate it. And Jen, we are so excited that you're back. And for those who don't know Jen, or just want a little refresher on her amazing background, Jen has been a sales leader in a number of different companies. I had the opportunity and the pleasure to work with Jen at Serious Decisions and then Forrester, but she's gone on to lead different sales organizations in a variety of high-performing environments, everything from startups to enterprise level. And she has been kind of a longtime proponent of developing sales enablement, as well as helping sales teams manage going through significant transformations. And I would say now is one of those times. So no surprise that Jen is the perfect guest for this week. And we also have a great topic this week that sort of is unfortunately an evergreen topic, and that's sales and marketing alignment. And Jen, one of the things that I really appreciate about your perspective is you take a really holistic look at what it means for sales and marketing to be aligned. What I love is, first of all, for you to maybe open up and tell us, when you think of sales and marketing alignment, what are some of the things you look for in that, to have in place to say we are actually aligned? What are some of the elements of alignment for you?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, John and Meg, for having me back. Happy to be here. And, sales and marketing and product, the whole go-to-market alignment is really in my DNA. Having been at Serious Decisions early in my career, sales and marketing alignment is what we espoused and worked with so many leaders on, and I think what alignment means is really just an agreement and shared understanding of vision, mission, and goals. We see that highly aligned go-to-market functions outperform those that aren't, both in revenue growth and profitability. And it's really interesting that Forrester research report that you posted in the chat, Meg, that Forrester found that 82% of C-level B2B executives will tell you that they're aligned. But then when you ask the teams themselves, 65% say that they aren't. So, I think it's one thing to think you are, but then, as you move into execution, are you really? And that alignment to me, again, is just what is the vision, what is the mission, and what are the goals, and how do we all work together to get there?
Yeah, that's amazing kind of snippet there. And I imagine both brand and demand play a big factor in how you go to market. And maybe I'll tackle the demand question first. And thinking about, actually, in your last conversation that we had together, and I've talked to a lot of people, heads of sales, CROs, as well as heads of marketing. You were the only one that right out of the jump really dove into the demand side of kind of unpacking how the demand gets created, such that your teams were investing their time in the highest value or highest return area. Maybe if you could just double click into that thought process or the data-driven mentality of how you approach your demand thinking from a sales or CRO perspective, Because that probably ties into alignment as well with the marketing side.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. And I'm of a bit of a geek and love data. So I'm very data driven and really like to ground all the decisions that I'm making in data. And to that, I've had the opportunity to work for very large public companies with excellent brand recognition. And I've had the opportunity to work for startups with hardly any brand recognition. And I've learned recently how closely the two are tied together. And there's this new term out there, brand gen. And I believe in that alignment and fusion, honestly, now more than ever. And John, that conversation you were talking about, I was in my last role doing some research just around demand source, right? And lead quality and routing continues to be, a challenge for organization. And, in terms of the data on the lead source, it's looking at where the leads that are converting, where are they coming from? Are they coming from partners? Are they coming from inbound? Is it coming from SDRs, et cetera, or AE or ABM? So that was really helpful to be able to arm me to go have conversations with my counterparts in branding, in demand gen, the SDR team, and the quota carriers themselves to say what's working and what's not. And there's so many limited resources these days, and there's so much noise in the market in terms of getting people's attention, that understanding what's working and what's not is so important. Not to say we should throw out everything that isn't at the top of the stack in terms of where that demand is coming in, but just understanding what's working and what's not. And from the brand awareness piece, that is, as a sales leader, something that I've learned just how important it is, as I've been in some of these smaller startup organizations. There's research that shows that 95% of buyers at any given time are not actively in the market and in a buying process. And so, one, you need to try to capture the demand of the 5% that are, but that same research shows that 80% of people, when they do buy, they'll buy from somebody they know. And so that kind of brand gen concept of the air cover and then the demand gen underneath it is so important to arm your inside sales team and your quota carrying sales organization coupled with ABM to be able to open the door and have conversations with people and be in their consideration set when they're ready to, start thinking about a purchase decision.
Well, and Jen, I think that, that's a really important comment, right? Is you've got a bunch of different jobs that you need both sales and marketing to do, depending on, where your buyers are. And one of the things that is, I think, a hot topic with marketers right now is how do you prove the value of brand investments? And it occurs to me that if you've got a sales leader with your perspective, that's going to be a lot easier. I mean, what are some of the things you've done to help be able to encourage getting some budget for branding for your marketing cohort?
Yeah, great question. So, well, part of that is the down funnel feedback, which is scary because that's a lagging indicator. At that point, you have the business or you don't, you have the leads or you don't, right? But that's certainly a piece of it. And then it's just the leading indicators anecdotally about, are we getting opens and clicks in our outreach? Are we getting people to take meetings and appointments with us, right? And so just understanding what that inbound looks like, and I think another piece of, some of the things to do to get budget from that brand is the data and the research really helps just understanding how much of the buying journey goes through the dark funnel, and knowing that you need to be in the consideration set for people to even evaluate or take a conversation with you. So that research and data has been incredibly powerful, coupled with, bottom of the funnel metrics. And then also there's the ABM piece as well. And I've seen that 1-to-1 and 1-to-few ABM is where there's a lot of conversation for budget as well. 1-to-many, I think, is a little bit easier, but that 1-to-1 and 1-to-few piece, I've been part of a lot of workshops recently where sales and marketing teams have been coming together to figure out how can we break into this new strategic account, how can we penetrate deeper into the enterprise. And there really is a need for this in-person component, this ABM component, to be able to increase wallet share. So that's been helpful as well to open conversations and open budgets around the branding aspect.
Yeah, that's really interesting about the ABM and kind of the 1-to-1 and 1-to-few interest. And I'm curious, you as a sales leader, if you're trying to penetrate certain set of accounts, enterprise accounts, how would you go about doing it? Would you do a one-to-one? Would you use AI at all in a one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many on the outreach, or is it, very custom on each of those, or, really depending on your scale and scope, are you only doing one-to-many, one-to-few? Like what does that look like as a sales leader trying to think about penetrating enterprise accounts?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there with scale and scope. And then certainly what your goals are, right? Because that's going to really be important to drive the strategy and the budget as well. From a scale and scope, if you're on the smaller side, I think one to many is much easier because you can cast a wider net. I think with a smaller scale and scope, the one to few is easier to dip your toe into than the one-to-one, because the one-to-one ends up being so expensive and so custom, and you put all your eggs in that basket of we're trying to penetrate into this one organization, and what if they happen to not be in the market at the moment, and we don't see the ROI that we need to. So that one to few, I think, is the best place to start, depending on scale and scope. And then from there, I really think it's looking at what are your goals, right? And in terms of AI, absolutely, I would use AI. I do think there's value in a portfolio approach as well. I think there should be an in-person component. And then I think there's, leveraging AI to balance scale with personalization. You can leverage AI on content, on, market research, on gathering all of the information, and then figuring out for that particular cohort that you're going after, what's important to them and what are you trying to accomplish there. Is it a meet and greet or a wine and dine type of event? Is it you need to bring thought leadership and research? Is it a microsite? What is it that's going to help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish in penetrating either the target accounts or the industries and verticals that you're going after.
Yeah,
So
Jen,
a little bit of everything, John.
it's a portfolio for sure. No,
Yeah,
and
it
I
really
think
is.
the perspective too on kind of one-to-one and one-to-few being an area of interest for the market, especially in North America, where it has been all scaled ABM for the most part. We're seeing some of the thought process that I see from clients of the Inflection Group in Europe, kind of bringing in some of that mindset where they really focused on the one-to-one and one-to-few because it just suits the market. But I think now we're starting to see North America need that motion as well. But you brought up content in that last piece. And that's another one where we've seen some really unfortunate data about the amount of content that marketing creates that goes unused by customers and by sales. What are some of the things that you would encourage kind of marketing to do to really understand what their sellers need so that you're not creating content that's not going to get used?
It's tough. And I feel like this is another evergreen topic, right? I'm remembering a decade ago when it was content was king and marketing's creating all this content that's not being used. And it's frustrating and it's not a good use of funds. And I think it's very bi-directional. So part of it is, what can marketing do to understand, the content that sales needs? But I also think sales needs to understand that marketing is not there just to create bespoke pieces that they might need for one account or one sales cycle as well, and how to leverage what they have and how to use AI to help themselves prepare for prospecting, for customer conversations. And so at the end of the day, once again, I think it's sales and marketing sitting down to say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? And what are the levers that we need to pull? And where can content have the biggest impact? Do we need content at the top of the funnel because, our brand awareness isn't there or our trust isn't there? And so we need case studies, right? That could be a piece of content. Or are we finding that there's a big drop off in our pipeline mid to late stage of the funnel, in which case maybe, there's testimonials or there's, product fact sheets or white papers that could be helpful. Is it cross-sell, upsell, and wallet share expansion, in which case it's creating content for existing customers about the breadth of the portfolio that an organization can provide value to. So I think it's before it's even what content, it's where are we against our growth goals as an organization? Where are there gaps and challenges, and where's there room to improve? And from there, that's what can help the leaders figure out which pieces of content are the right ones, and then how could marketing potentially create templates that are 90% of the way there, but sales can customize themselves so that marketing's not creating too many bespoke pieces, but sales has what they need. So, I think that's a great way to look at the conversation around content and how to create and what to create in terms of where the organization is and what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach in terms of how to think about the content.
Mhm.
It's such an interesting time right now with AI and content and being able to generate lots of content. Everybody wants to now get ranked in Chat GPT or Perplexity or any of the LLMs. So there's such a premium right now to create content, but without understanding the gaps or having that conversation, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. Oh God, you were about to say something?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, Nate, you bring up a good point, and I remember, Megan, you were instrumental in this at Serious Decisions, but it's aligning with the customer's priorities and having the customer be at the heart of all of the decisions that you make. Because John, you're right. It's so easy to put out content now, and there's so much. I mean, you see people posting on LinkedIn everywhere. There's so much content everywhere, and so I think using the customer as your North Star and making sure that everything's aligned to their persona and their priorities and things they care about is going to be really important, because now I think the biggest challenge isn't how do we create enough content, because with all the LLMs and AI, it's very easy to do. But then there's just a sea of content that you're trying to wade your way through as a salesperson, and also the customer. You've got to stand out, from all the noise and all the other content that they're seeing everywhere.
Yeah, how do you make it relevant? And you brought up something also very interesting about business goals and sitting down with sales and marketing and talking about business goals. At the heart of that is kind of getting to sales and marketing alignment. I'm curious, what's your experience there? Sales and marketing alignment we've been talking about for 20 years, but what are you seeing recently that's working or not working in that concept of sales and marketing alignment?
Yeah, great question. And it's pretty simple, it's trust, communication, shared goals, and vision. It's starting at the top is really important, from the CEO and executive leadership team on down, making sure that you're just respecting your colleagues, trusting them, and sharing that vision and communication open, and proactive is really important. And it's just doing the simple things really, really well, because that trickles down, and assuming positive intent from your colleagues. And I think, that Forrester stat really stuck with me, because if 82% of C-level executives say they're aligned, but 65% of their downstream teams say they aren't, that says there's a disconnect with the executives' vision and, the team's execution of it. And so having each other join, whether it's weekly meetings or, QBRs, what have you, and just being on the same page in terms of where the go-to-market team holistically is trying to get to, and then how each of the component functions helps get there sounds simple, but I think it really does, make such a big difference in terms of people's ability to say, oh, hey, John, you might be in marketing and I'm in sales. I get what you're trying to do. I respect that. Here's what I need. How can we work together to make sure that we're both, leveraging the resources we have and accomplishing our goals and moving in the same direction? So not rocket science, but also not easy to execute either.
Well, often the simplest things are the hardest. And I
Yeah.
think, you raised some really important points about at that executive team level really needing to operate as that concept of the first team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thinking we're all on the same team, and making sure that you've got a CEO, or other leaders in the room who are not encouraging competition, but instead encouraging collaboration, and honest feedback, so that you're getting what you need from one another. But kind of on that note, one of the things that can, I think, get lost in all the requests that go back and forth between sales and marketing is the ability to decide which ones are most important to do.
Yeah.
And you've got a lot of companies right now struggling with the whole do more with less problem, whether that's less money, less people, or doing more with the same money that you've had. What are some of the ways that you have worked with your marketing counterpart to help make sure that that they and you are doing the right things?
Well, it's such a good point, and it's so cliche to say that we're in this environment of do more with less, but it's true. And you can't do everything. You just can't. And so prioritizing is going to be so important. So that way everybody knows what they're focused on, and just as importantly, what to say no to. And so there's a couple different ways, that I've done this in the past. One of those is sitting down in a room and saying, okay, what are our organizational goals this year, as a company, right? Not as a department or function. And what are the levers going to be that are going to help us be most successful in getting there? And that then is a great way to frame out, where do we prioritize and where do we spend our time and our money? And that's the way that I've seen it work really well in the past in different environments, because that way everything that you're doing is tied to and aligned to your goals. And then it's tough. I think reevaluating it quarterly is important because things change, things evolve. And do we need to make an exception in terms of, what we're focused on?
Maybe just the flip of that question, since you've had experiences, I would assume, in seeing other enterprises adopt sales and marketing alignment as well as
Mm.
your own, are there any landmines or things that you've seen that are not the right way to do it? The inverse of what does good look like, what does not good look like from what you've seen or experienced, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so, I think there's a couple things there. I think one, when you don't put the customer first, often what you're focused on and what you're creating, whether it be leads or content or, brand, doesn't resonate and land, and you don't see the results and impact. I think, and I've seen this so many times, when organizations mean well, but they operate in silos, maybe because it's, certain people or just certain scale, in large organizations, in matrixed organizations, it's tough. But when all of those teams are operating in silos and they're not communicating, not only is there inefficiencies on spend and time and lack of alignment, but there's friction as well, because the teams just aren't working as well together. And then the last piece in terms of, what doesn't work well is, whether if you try to focus on everything and measure everything, it's just too much, and people get, frazzled, they get burnt out. And so I think taking a step back to say, what decisions do we need to make? What are we going to measure to make those decisions? And what are we going to focus on is helpful. And so when that piece is missing, it makes it really difficult for everyone who means well to, accomplish what they're trying to do.
Yeah, you make a great point, Jen, and I think kind of goes back to, your opening definition of sales and marketing alignment, which is agreement around kind of your vision, mission, and
Mm.
goals, and as well as your point about the customer being a North Star. If everyone understands, the customer, what the customer needs and what you need to deliver to them, and you're all in agreement on what things matter most to do that work, it's going to be a lot easier to get everybody moving in the same direction. But before we wrap things up, I wanted to ask you, one other element of alignment that we talked a lot about at Sirius was the product team.
Mm.
And that's, I think one of the areas where sales actually has a lot of influence in terms of encouraging product leaders to really listen to what's happening in the market and with customers. What are some of the ways that you interact with your counterparts in product? And what are some of the ways, you've been able to help share the things that you're hearing in a way that directs, future development?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's a huge, huge component, we talk about sales and marketing, but I really view it as, go to market, which includes product as well. We talked a lot about the product marketing side on the content piece of it, but I think product management is really, really important as well. And, I think it's, at the executive level, the CRO or the chief sales officer meeting with, the head of product on a weekly or biweekly basis is critical. Having inviting product leaders into, customer conversations, renewal calls, sales calls is really important to have the product organization hearing direct customer feedback. But it's a blessing, and it doesn't feel that way every day on every sales call that we're in. But the customer success team, the inside sales team, the quota carrying team are talking to customers and prospects every single day. And so really understanding their perspective of the organization, of the product, where the value is, where the ROI is, where the challenges are, is a gift to be able to have that information so that the product leadership and the product management team can be 4 iterations ahead on the product and making sure that they're looking around corners and coming to market with what is going to be most valuable to the customers and stand out from the competition. And so just working really closely together internally on strategy and operations, but then also that closed loop feedback from the front lines to the product team, and including the product team on these customer and prospect conversations, I think is critical.
Awesome. I think we covered all the topics. I guess last quick question on my side, going into 2026, any advice that you would give to either sellers or marketers about selling into 2026? It's been a pretty challenging 2025. What advice would you give for 2026?
Oh goodness, it's hard to pick one thing, but you're right. It has been a really challenging environment. And so I would say just take a breath, stay focused, put the customer first, and, really just look at what you're doing and make sure that, all of your activities are focused on, moving the needle forward for your customers and your companies, and working collaboratively together. I think when you can have that approach and that view, you make more forward progress.
Well, Jen, thank you so much. We're so excited that you could join us again today. And you always bring really, really valuable and practical and actionable perspectives. So we extra appreciate that. John, I think, as we kind of wrap things up, any last comments from you or Jen, anything you want to share before we go?
Thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure and good to see you, Meg and John.
Great having you, Jen. And we're going to be taking next week off with the holiday, but we'll be returning right after the holiday, December 5th, with Jennifer Ives, who will be talking about AI adoption at the executive level. She has been talking to a number of executives and talking about adoption and some of the challenges and trying to infuse AI across teams. It'll be a really interesting conversation. So hope you can join us then.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. And with that, we will say goodbye and happy Friday, everyone.
Happy
Take
Thanksgiving.
care.